Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Moscow Board of Adjustments meeting this evening. Apologies, I'm running late. I guess our first order of business is the approval of minutes from, it's been a while back. It was actually November 18th of 2020. I was not there. Any other comments?
I was there and they looked fine.
All right. Does that mean I have a motion?
I would be happy to move approval of the minutes.
I second.
I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Aye. Minutes are approved. I would like to take our second item and move it to the end. Do I need to do a motion for that? Or can we just do that?
That's what I was going to suggest. I think that's a good idea, Joe.
Fair enough. We will do our election of officers after the main thing tonight so that you folks out there don't have to watch us deal with that.
Shouldn't take long.
All right. Staff, can you?
All right. Good evening, everyone. Let me get my screen sharing happening. All right. So tonight, we have a conditional use permit for a wireless communication facility proposed at 1400 East 7th Street. The applicant's requesting a conditional use permit to construct an 80-foot tall wireless communication facility, as I said, located at 1400 East 7th Street. That location is the property of the Church of the Nazarene. This is a fully enclosed facility with an 800 square foot lease area, and it's designed to resemble a church tower. It's also designed to accommodate 3 additional carriers per the City of Moscow code. A little bit of background. July 30th of 2018, Pearland LLC applied for a conditional use permit to construct an 80-foot wireless communication facility at the same location. The facility at that time was designed to resemble a stealth-style monopine tower intended to resemble a tree. On November 18th, 2018, the Board of Adjustment denied the application, finding the monopine tower was not consistent with the existing character of the neighborhood and would not be in harmony with the land uses surrounding the subject property, and the scale of the proposed tower is significantly larger than any of the structures or trees in the surrounding area. On November 27th, Bush Law Firm filed an appeal on behalf of the applicant. And on January 7th of 2019, City Council reviewed the appeal and sustained the decision to deny the application. So tonight's proposal is the same site as previous. It's 231,678 square feet. The Church of the Nazarene campus is split up into 11 parcels. The proposed site is located on the southwest corner of the campus. As you can see here, this is the proposed parcel. In close proximity, we have Shorts Funeral Chapel, Picard Orthodontics, Carol Ryan Brink Park, as well as Eastgate Park or Triangle Park. The zoning in that area is neighborhood business. The antenna towers are considered a conditional use within all zoning districts per Moscow City Code. Here is a map of the current zoning. As you can see, Church of the Nazarene campus, neighborhood business. The surrounding is R3, and then on the outskirts R2. This is the site part of the proposed plans, just showing the tower intended to resemble a church tower. And what you have here, it's 80 foot in height at the very top. This first section of antennas is intended to accommodate AT&T. There's talks at the second level for T-Mobile, and then further down Dish Network. Additionally, you'll see in your packets the height here of the existing power lines, as well as the existing arborvitae that runs along the adjacent property. Here you'll see the existing height of the cross on top of Church in the Nazarene. I believe it was 62.4 feet in comparison to the 80-foot tall tower. The design of the tower is intended to replicate the design of the church. Here's the overall site showing those 11 parcels in their entirety. The proposed construction of the wireless facility is here on the southeast portion of this parcel in this red area. This is a zoomed in image of that same location showing the enclosed lease area here, along with Park Avenue here, or Park Street here, and this house here that is owned also by the Church of the Nazarene, and then the existing church facility here. Again, same site shot showing the existing vegetation here, proposed type A landscape barrier, enclosed fencing. This structure itself, this is the tower, this circular image here. There will be generators, ancillary facilities over here to the directly adjacent to that tower. And there's an existing storage shed that will be moved further to the east in order to accommodate this site location. So here you have the current view from the north property line. These are just some photo simulation, I can't speak right now, showing what the proposed facilities will look like once, if built and approved. This is, again, the view from the north property line. This is from the northeast as it exists today, and if the proposed tower were constructed. This is from the southeast, and here we have from the south. This is the existing service area that AT&T covers currently. As you can see, there is the area here is their target service area that the objective is to, create a more continuous service for those customers. And that is the target area that they are intending to focus on here with this tower. This is what the result would be after this tower were constructed with those antennas. The yellow section being new coverage area and the green being existing. And then this is just a closer up image of the same. The applicant has provided the city in your packets of different alternate location analysis. If I can put my glasses on here and read my notes a little bit further, because that print is kind of small for me. The first alternative site location that's listed here in this location is Vista Water Tower. And the applicant can go more into details about their findings on these alternate locations. Second location here, Brink Nature Park. The third location, alternate location, is 8th Street Water Tower here, and then a commercial property over here at East City Marketplace. Those are the alternate sites they use for analysis in this particular application. So the development standards for wireless facilities require setbacks that no antenna tower that exceeds 60 feet in height shall be located within 500 feet from the State Highway 8 or 95 rights of way. This proposed tower would be located 3,480 feet north of the Highway 8. Development Standard 2 is security. Every telecommunication facility shall be protected from unauthorized access by appropriate security measures. The proposed site is enclosed by a 6-foot block wall, and ancillary facilities will be fully enclosed within the proposed site. Number 3, lighting. Every antenna and antenna tower shall not be lighted, and such lighting shall not be more than a minimum required by such agency, and the submitted plans showed no lighting on the proposed tower. Number 4, Noise reduction. Generating equipment shall be sound buffered by means of baffling barriers or other suitable means to reduce the sound level measured at the property line to 45 decibels. Current plans also show a Type A landscape buffer on the western side of the proposed site that will shield the site from Park Drive, as required by city code as well. All other development standards under this section of the code will be met as a part of the permitting process. Development standard number 8, any new or relocation antenna tower 80 feet or greater in height shall be designed to and constructed to accommodate at least 2 additional users. Two additional users need to be accommodated as indicated by the response to the noticing provisions. And the proposed facility is designed to accommodate three carriers. The applicant has provided a notarized commitment to share location as well, share use. So it is for those reasons that staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit for the proposed 80-foot wireless communication facility located at 1400 East 7th Street with no conditions, and the board to direct staff to prepare relevant criteria and standards based on your findings tonight. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
I have a couple.
Yes.
The first zoning item has to do with the placement of towers within 500 feet of Highway 8 and 95. I suspect that's for expansion, but that one's a very specific requirement or non-requirement. Why is it limited to just those 2 roadways and nothing else?
I believe, and Mike could correct me if I'm wrong, but it may be an ITD requirement for the 500 feet from state highways.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's some ITD requirement based upon that.
Okay. But there are no other requirements that would limit locations anyplace else other than those 2?
As far as
Road.
Streets?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. The second one had to do with lighting. I know this one doesn't have lights on it, and it says that they shouldn't have them, but in our packet, it also mentioned unless federal aviation requires it. At what height does federal aviation require it?
I want to say that it's 200 feet based on for the previous written record.
Okay.
I have not looked at the federal aviation requirements, but it is their requirement, and this height does not meet that requirement.
Okay. The other questions I have are historical because I wasn't here when this went through the first time. Was the location the same?
Yes.
And was the height the same?
Yes.
Okay. Who else has questions? Marshall?
Yeah, Amy, I probably didn't hear you. You probably told us, but between your mask and my hard hearing, it was kind of tough. The house that is south of the proposed site, is that on the part of the church campus? Is that owned by the church?
Yes, the house, if I can go back to the zoning map here, I'll actually point it out to you. That way we're all on the same page here. Let's see. So this house right here, is this, let's see, so campus is here, this property right here, this house, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yes, that house is owned by the Church of the Nazarene.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, once she's done there, we'll open it up for the applicant to come up and speak and talk about this. And for those of you that haven't been to one of these meetings before, what we'll do is, well, one, you need to state your name and address into the record at the mic, because that way it's picked up. We'll let the applicant describe what they're doing, and then we'll open it up for those in favor, and then we'll open it up for those either neutral or opposed, and then we'll give the applicant a chance to come back up and rebut, and then we'll close the public hearing. So that's the basic ground rules. So if the applicant would come up and describe what's being proposed.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Kimberly Allen. I'm with the Wireless Policy Group. I'm on your screen, not in person, because I am awaiting the second half of my vaccine. So I appreciate the opportunity to appear remotely this evening. I represent Parallel Infrastructure, the applicant here. And with me, I have Gregory Bush, also from the Wireless Policy Group. And he's going to be helping us with a brief presentation that we have for you that focuses on some of the approval criteria for a conditional use permit under the Moscow Code. Next slide. As Amy described, we are proposing to build an 80-foot tall wireless communication facility designed as a church tower. At the last go-round in 2018, Parallel Infrastructure, then called Lend-Lease, heard the board and the concerns about the neighborhood and compatibility. The finding that an 80-foot pine tree not found in the neighborhood would be incompatible with the surroundings. So we went back to the drawing board and sharpened our pencils and came up with a redesign based on the architecture of the church, reflecting the primary use of the property as a church, and have proposed the facility before you. AT&T will be the first and primary tenant on there. They will co-locate on the facility to fill a significant gap in their high-band 4G LTE coverage that's currently experienced by its customers in eastern Moscow, as well as to add network capacity to unburden AT&T's existing facilities west of Main Street. The facility will provide coverage to residential areas within that map, that are not able to be adequately served by existing facilities due to the topography of the area. This facility is also very important because it will support AT&T's FirstNet effort that creates dedicated communication channels that prioritize first responder communications in the event of an emergency. This is a nationwide initiative that AT&T is participating in which learns the lessons learned from the wildfires, the flooding, the hurricanes over the past, where emergency responders had difficulty setting up communications. This is the response to that. Next slide. So you saw some pictures, and I was not able to see the screen from my vantage point, but this is the tower as proposed. Next slide. And I really want to focus on the conditional use permit criteria that you have in the staff report and demonstrate that we do meet the criteria before you tonight for approval. This first conditional use permit criterion talks about there not being a suitable alternative within the necessary geographic area that would meet the applicant's requirements, considering height, structural integrity, or other conditions that render antennas or antenna support structures geographically unsuitable. Next slide. In the staff report, we do a project history, and in our narrative and statement of code compliance, we also set that forth. We have a long history of trying to find a suitable facility for a number of different carriers in the Moscow area. The first, of course, is the November 2018 proposal for a monopine on this site. And the board and the council both found that this would be out of character with the surrounding neighborhood. So we also then took a look at just Parallel Infrastructure is a provider of wireless infrastructure so that carriers can come and locate on it. But both Parallel Infrastructure and the wireless industry in general have tried to locate on facilities on or around the Vista water tank on South Hathaway. Several proposals have been rejected by the city, and others have been found to be technically infeasible by both the city and the wireless industry. And then Parallel also requested to place a wireless facility adjacent to the tower, and was also rejected by the city, a separate standalone support structure for wireless at that location. Next slide. AT&T also investigated a new tower at Brink Park. The RF engineers took a look and evaluated a new tower with a 75-foot antenna tip height at Carroll Riley Brink Park off of Joseph Street, very close to here. The potential new tower at Brink Park would provide limited coverage and which would focus primarily on the commercial areas and not the targeted residential areas due to its location. It was found to be not a good solution for the coverage objectives that have been identified by AT&T for this site. They also took a look at the existing water tank on 8th Street, about a third of a mile southwest of the facility. The co-location would have been at a 30-foot antenna tip height. AT&T found that this particular location would provide 84.5% less coverage within the targeted service area, so was rejected as not a viable candidate. Next slide. Finally, AT&T's engineers took a look at proposing a new tower, 96 feet antenna tip height tower on commercial property south of the proposed facility. This currently proposed facility at the church would provide 14% more coverage within the targeted service area. But it's also important that the tower on commercial property would have the same problem as one of the water tank locations, that it would not provide coverage to the residential areas. It would provide coverage primarily to the commercial areas and would overlap with some of AT&T's existing coverage. So it too was found not to be a suitable location. So we've tried to do our homework and investigate, all possibilities within the search ring. We're constrained by distance as to what the carriers, require in terms of geography and location. Next slide. But in conducting that investigation and considering all of those alternatives, we feel that we've met condition number 1 for a conditional use permit. Now, the second criterion talks about the aesthetics here, and that the design, including antennas and ancillary facilities, minimizes the visual impact and complies with the provisions of the section. I think Amy walked through how the facility will comply with the other aspects of the Moscow Code. Parallel really tried to take the message from the board to heart last time and look for a different way to blend this facility in on the church campus. Churches, typically will have a bell tower structure of some sort. That tower is generally taller than the church. What the engineers have tried to do in designing the facility is to make sure, one, all of the equipment and wiring and everything will be contained within the structure itself. You will not see exterior wires hanging off. You won't see antennas. Everything will be included behind screening and within the tower. The structure that we're proposing would be painted consistent with the built environment, which is the church and the church buildings. We incorporate a circular topper that is similar to the roof of the church. And then the transparent crosses on each side are made out of material that will allow the RF signals to penetrate while still concealing the antennas. So we think that we have chosen a design that is consistent with the property. It reflects the primary use of the property as a church facility, as opposed to a very large tree that is not replicated in the neighborhood anywhere. So we believe that we've met the requirement that we minimize visual impact to the greatest extent possible here. Next slide. And that's just another view showing the consistency of the architecture from the church to the adjacent tower structure. Next slide. The third criteria requires that the tower location, minimize the number or size of antenna towers that would be required in the area. Next slide. I think as Amy walked you through, this tower is designed for 3 carriers: AT&T at the top, T-Mobile in the center, and Dish below. I know that Parallel is in discussions right now with both T-Mobile and Dish to locate within this facility. That eliminates the need for two standalone towers for those carriers. They would instead share this well-designed facility, and also would have to seek their own permitting from the city to when they decide to locate here as well. So the city would have some controls over the deployment of equipment that would happen here by subsequent carriers. Next slide. And then the last conditional use permit criterion is that the applicant has not failed to take advantage of reasonably available shared use opportunities. And as the procedural history, demonstrates, the applicant has looked at many alternatives here to try to find a suitable alternative to this location to serve the residential areas that surround this, and has been unsuccessful. And moreover, by building this facility, the applicant is creating additional available shared use opportunities for carriers to minimize the number of hours. Next slide. And we also wanted to just speak to the need for this facility, because I think that that's important to talk about as you make your decision tonight. Next slide. I mentioned FirstNet earlier, and this is a partnership with law enforcement that is nationwide, which is requires AT&T to upgrade its existing facilities, to build new facilities, to deploy the wireless spectrum set aside for public safety, which is band 14. So AT&T will be adding this to all of their existing facilities and building it into the facilities yet to be built. And FirstNet, what it will do is provide public safety users with the assurance of network access whenever they need it. AT&T is designing the FirstNet network to consider location and facility requirements for in tandem with law enforcement and first responders to make sure that the siting, placement, and operation of these facilities provides the support that those providers will need in the event of an emergency. Next slide. So I know Amy had these up on the screen. So this is the existing 4G LTE coverage. And just to address one point made in one of the public comment letters, 4G LTE is 4G. There's no other version of it. I think that one of the letter writers referred to pure 4G. And that certainly, these terms are used interchangeably in the wireless industry, 4G and 4G LTE. So this is a 4G coverage solution. And as you can see, next slide. This will provide substantial additional coverage and capacity. And I think that the capacity needs are really important to consider here. I think what the last year has demonstrated to us is that having seamless and reliable wireless service in residential neighborhoods is not a nice to have anymore. People, especially this year, were working from home. They were engaging in remote learning. They were using telemedicine and dozens and dozens of other applications that require a reliable wireless connection. These residential areas have typically been difficult to serve with the macro network that we have because of the few number of sites that you can have a wireless facility on in a residential zone. Typically we're limited to any non-residential use, such as a church or a school or a meeting hall or something like that. So the opportunities for siting have been very few, and certainly they have not addressed the exploding need for additional coverage and data capacity as people use their wireless phones in ways that weren't contemplated when the network was built. So the additional capacity is like an overcrowded freeway. It provides some off ramps and moves the traffic along into more manageable patterns so that no part of the network is experiencing dropped calls, inability to text, the spinning wheel on your phone that shows that nothing's happening there. All of those things are a function of capacity, the number of users on the network, and the amount of data they're using at any given time of day. So next slide. With that, Greg and I are here, and we are happy to answer any questions that any of the members of the board will have. And we thank you very much for your time and consideration of this very important site. Thank you.
I suspect we have questions for you. I have a couple that had to do with the first item that you addressed with regards to height and the other alternate locations. With all the information we were given, I didn't quite track how height of the tower affects how effective it is. One of your examples had a 96-foot tower, which obviously is taller than 80, and it wasn't as efficient, and it was on basically low ground. And there was another example that was only a 30-foot tall tower, but it was up on a taller area, which I would assume is where you would get your best reception. Can you address that question, if the question was understood?
Sure, I do understand it. It's a great question. Yeah, the coverage objectives for a particular site are, and the height needed to address those coverage objectives are very site specific. As you noted, you can have a site that has a very, that's graded very tall. The elevation is tall. On sites like that, you can sometimes use a shorter tower. You have sites that are sited very low, and then you need to have a taller tower. This site, actually, the antenna tip height inside is 75 feet. There's some accommodation of height there for the actual top of the structure itself. So this site is like at least one of the other examples that we talked about. The other challenge we have in building a site that will accommodate 3 carriers is that you have to have enough height so that the co-location spaces, and you have to account for separation between the various carriers. You can't put the antennas right next to each other. There has to be a separation of 10 to 20 feet between or 10 feet between the antenna arrays of various carriers to avoid interference. So in order to make the various antenna locations within this particular structure attractive to carriers, you have to have a certain amount of height. Also, to serve the breadth of the coverage area that you saw demonstrated on that map, the RF engineers took a look at that and concluded that 75-foot antenna tip height was the minimum necessary to do that. They had actually wanted a 100-foot tower at this location and to serve an even greater range, but adjusted the height requirements and the ask here based on the character of the neighborhood and what they thought the site could accommodate and still be compatible. I hope I've answered your question. I know that the top of the cross on the church is at 62 feet, so this is not terribly much taller than the existing church itself when you look at the cross on the top. But that's the difference between the different heights at different locations. It has to do with the topography. It also has to do with the amount of clutter. Tall trees, buildings, things like that will interfere with signal as well, and so you need to clear that in order to have a good signal.
Okay, you answered my first question. You actually answered my second question too, and that question was it looked like the separation between the carrier spaces was give or take 15 feet, it seemed like, per scale. And so I was wondering how the third person at 45 feet, give or take, would have the same signal strength as the one at 60 and the one at 75. And so you actually addressed that too.
Well, also the different carriers use different parts of the spectrum to carry their signal, and different parts of the spectrum have different performance qualities. Some go very far and can go through a lot of clutter and objects. Some don't propagate very far but carry a lot of data. And also in the case of the 30-foot site that was included in the alternative analysis, that was a water tower, and we can't make it any taller. That was as tall as it was. So we tried to see if there was some sort of a solution that could be engineered there, but it certainly wasn't possible. But the 30-foot site is sort of an outlier among the examples of the alternatives that we sought.
Yes, Mr. Allen, I'm Marshall Comstock, and I had a couple of questions for you. How many generators at any one time will be on the proposed site?
On as in present or on as in running?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you asking how many generators will be present on the site
Yes,
at one time? Okay.
yes.
And AT&T has requested a generator on site to accommodate power outages. I believe that T-Mobile has also requested space for a generator on site. We have not gotten that request from Dish at this time.
Okay, and how often are those generators normally tested?
They're tested once a month for an hour, and we can certainly work with the neighbors to make sure that any generator testing that's done is done at a time that won't disturb sleep or weekend recreation, during normal business hours, so that the impact to the neighbors is minimized.
Okay, and how about the third carrier, if there is one?
I don't know if there's space here for a third generator. The only space that I know that's been allocated is for the two carriers to have a generator each. Not every carrier needs a generator.
Okay, great. My next question has to do on your alternative sites, your assessment of the alternative sites. I see that there was a couple that you suggested that may go on the water towers or on property where the Vista water tower lays then you also did an assessment, or at least a proposal to look at a commercial site out by Highway 8. And I guess my question is, why did you only limit your choices of alternative sites to those areas when there are other areas that may have fit the bill better?
Well, the areas in which we can look are selected by the RF engineers for the carriers. They search rings, specific, rather small areas now compared to years back. Capacity sites, typically, when you add capacity, you're using data frequencies that don't go very far, and so the search rings are smaller. So we looked at the available locations within these search rings. You certainly have to have a willing landlord. You have to have it in a place that works from an RF perspective. You also want to have it in a location that minimizes the impacts to the neighborhood. All of those considerations go into which ones we chose. I think we had a fair selection based on the constraints of where we were able to look.
Yeah. Well, when we had the proposal before us by Parallel, we made some suggestions of some sites because we felt that we know our city better than any. And one of the sites that we suggested they look at was the Latah County Fairgrounds. It's actually in your target area. It's not necessarily a residential area. And it's my understanding that Latah County was never even approached about it.
Well, Mr. Comstock, I am unfamiliar with that site. We can certainly get some information about that. I suspect that it would have been ruled out for RF reasons, would be my guess. I don't have a history on them approaching the fairgrounds. Some of the due diligence is done, with the various carriers in-house before we ever propose a site. So I suspect that that's what happened, that it wouldn't work from an RF perspective. But I can certainly verify that.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
evening. Just a couple of quick questions. I hear a lot about 4G in this proposal, in this project, but it seems like everything I read in the news is 5G. So why, I'm not a 4G, 5G expert, but why aren't we going for 5G?
Well, okay, both networks will exist simultaneously for decades. We're just now starting to ease away from providing 3G at all of these sites, to give you an idea. And 4G has been around for many, many years. So people's phones aren't necessarily backward compatible with new technology. So we'll need we will need both for the foreseeable future. Right now, 5G, certainly this tower will be available for AT&T to modify the site internally to add 5G antennas when the network calls for that. But right now, they're really trying to look at 4G, which carries a lot of data and can go further. They're looking at 4G and adding to that network up before introducing 5G, which it typically runs on spectrum that doesn't go very far. So that's the problem. But ultimately, I think all of the carriers are introducing 5G. It's just a matter of time, and they do have the option to come back later to the site and seek permits to modify the site to add those antennas.
Okay, so it won't need another site, just upgrade this site.
Right.
Just curious, what is the construction material of the tower?
Oh boy.
Is it concrete? Is it plywood? Is it cardboard? I don't know.
I'm gonna ask Greg if he knows.
I only ask that question because I think it might have something to do with appearance and also maintainability.
Sure, and any of the plans, I'm not sure exactly. I'd have to take a closer look at the plans, and I think maybe Greg is doing that right now. But it would have all of the building permit requirements and as well as the planner's requirements for materials that would be good looking. I understand your concern. You don't want to.
While he's looking,
cheap plywood structure up
while
there.
he's looking, I think going back to the question on generators, the way it's been presented is there'll be a maintenance once a month for an hour to do maintenance. But if each carrier has its own, it would imply one to think that there's twice as many maintenance hours because there's more generators. So my obvious question is, why can't all the services, since the generator is for power outages, why does each carrier need its own generator when it seems like it's an emergency status? I'm not an electrician, but I would think that, I know those probably different wattages requirements, but I think that's just a component of inverters or so. I just don't know why we need a diesel generator for each carrier if it's for an emergency use.
Yeah, and I know that the power needs for this site, you're crossing over into outside of my expertise. I'm not an electrician either or electrical engineer, but I do know that that each of the carriers has different equipment that has different power needs, and I'm not at all sure that they could share a generator. Also, I'm not sure of the timing that would occur. AT&T as the primary tenant will need to put a generator on site right away. Certainly, if you're concerned about multiple cyclings per month to test the generators, you could write a condition that would require them to all test on the same day or during the same time slot to coordinate the testing.
As long as
generators.
that would make sense if the decibel level just remains the same. But now, last question, I think, because I've heard a couple of things. My observation is it's because I heard a couple different vertical separations from the top of the tower to the top of the cross. I come up with 14 feet, and I heard a couple other things. It doesn't seem very much of a difference, but the top of the cross is 66 feet AGL, and the top of the tower is 80. I just thought I'd clarify that, unless I got it wrong here. But okay, that's all I have for now.
All right. And I did find, this is Greg Bush with Wireless Policy Group, by the way. I did find the answer to your question. And unfortunately, the drawings do not go into that level of detail. I'm looking at sheet A2 of the drawings, most recent version of the drawings. And unfortunately, it says framing, cladding, and EIFS finish on the tower is to be provided by the general contractor. And it also describes the composition of the architectural tower is to be designed by others. So unfortunately, we don't have that information available as current.
All right.
But we would have to meet the city standards for this structure and to be able to get our building permit approved.
So this is Steve Bush, and I've got a question and a clarification, I guess, on criteria number 3 on page 2 of the application. It says that the 2 diesel generators will run in the event of a power outage, and once a week for 1 hour of maintenance. And you're mentioning it's once a month, and in the application it says it's going to run once a week for an hour. And so I was just wondering if that, which one would be correct, I guess.
I may have misspoke. It may be, if the application says once per week, then that's probably what's contemplated. My apologies for the confusion on that.
And my other question is concerning alternative sites, and Marshall had brought up the county, which is, I think, a good alternative, and next to the county is the fire station, and at the fire station they have a building there. I think it's 3 stories, made out of brick, and I'm wondering if that site would be possible to put a tower above this building, the brick building that the fire station uses for training, and it is just on the county property or just adjacent to it. But I'm certain that it's still 500 feet away from Highway 8, and that building, that would be some structure that would be, I think, sturdy enough to hold towers, because it's brick building, and I'm just wondering if that site would be worth taking a look at. And again, it's in the neighborhood of the fairgrounds that Marshall had brought up.
Well, and to answer your question, Parallel Infrastructure is building a tower for multiple carriers that will house multiple carriers and their needs. They're in discussions with all 3 at this point. I'm not familiar with the constraints of each of the carrier networks and where they're going to need to be. You have the analysis of AT&T's needs here, and what I would conclude, if those sites are not included in the alternatives analysis, is that they were ruled out because they didn't work for the RF coverage objectives. Either the elevation is wrong, they may have been ruled out because there was contact with the landlord, and the landlord was not willing to lease space there. It's outside the distance that AT&T requires, or it might be unsuitable for other carriers in discussions that that they're having with other carriers. Sometimes attaching to a brick structure is not really inherently able to carry the load necessarily, and as stable as something like concrete or steel. The antennas and have some substantial weight, and as well as the equipment that's within there. So I think there might be some engineering concerns there too. We looked at the alternatives that were feasible here, and we're unable to make them work. There's not being familiar with where these 2 are, although knowing that much due diligence was conducted since 2018, since your last decision. I know that the feasible alternatives that were identified were pursued, some and did not work for one reason or another. And so those are the alternatives that we presented to you. And I think that under the Moscow Code, as well as federal law, we're required to investigate, a number of reasonable alternatives, but not to rule out every alternative, that might exist, especially if it's outside the search ring for the giving carrier. So that's a long-winded answer to your question. I apologize for the length of that, but I assume that neither one of those sites worked for this facility. I don't know if the city of Moscow has been approached by the FirstNet project here. That's, as I said, it's a national project. They are identifying a certain frequency bands that they want to make available to all first responders and law enforcement. So band 14 will give everyone a priority jump in the event of an emergency. So I don't know if there's a role for particular local or law enforcement or first responder organizations at this time, but certainly they would reap the benefit of the FirstNet network by having access to band 14 and also priority access to the AT&T network in general during times of that they're not experiencing an emergency. Sure.
Has worked out, is my understanding.
Is the question for me or for staff?
Feels correctly that you have approached the city.
That is correct.
None. I will now open it up to anybody. Proposal. Please come up and state your name and address to the record. And
1334 Wallen Road, Moscow.
The microphones were cutting out. What do you say?
Excuse me.
are all the mic, can actually our tech guy answer that question? Are all of our mics cutting out? Everyone's gonna have a chance to speak, and I need to have everybody at the mic, so maybe I'll have you come up second after David talks.
I totally agree with the written testimony in the packet by Michael Kite, and I substantially agree with the renter's testimony. This application appears to be substantially the same as the application of July 30, 2018, which was denied. The structure would simulate a church tower. Previous application tower would have simulated a tree. Personally, I think the tree is nicer than the huge-looking tower. That application was denied, appealed, and the denial was upheld. Second point, antenna towers should be separated from the property line of any adjacent property, according to number 6 in the application. And my question is, to they're separate properties, and that's the way they appears to be written up in the code for edge effects and so forth. Quote, the facility will provide coverage to residential areas not able to be served by existing facilities due to the topography of the area, end quote. The area is served by other telecommunications providers. And then later in the application, it does say that this area already has AT&T coverage. So that seems like they're saying that they don't have coverage, and then in a different part of the application, they say they do. And
All right, we have Kim and Greg can hear us and we can hear them. Our mics aren't working, so we'll all have to talk loud. The next person who would care to come up and to the microphone that's not working and state your name and address for us, please. And we'll keep moving forward.
So this would be pretty simple. I'm Jerry Lewis. I live on Park Drive. And I got this notice of public hearing, and I have a neighbor and then a person from the city, and they told me this was an application for 5G, not 4G. And I don't have any problem with the 4G. I have lots of problems with 5G, so if you're going to do 5G, I'll be back. But as far as I'm concerned, where we live, looking over across 7th Street, and then there's a house there, and I probably wouldn't like your big tall tower over there to look at every morning, but it beats the heck out of 5G. So, I have no problem with 4G. That's my telephone, right? And 5G is, I know more about 5G than anybody here, I'll tell you. I've done so much work with 5G and what countries have it and what counties and what countries have it. And it's spreading like wildfire, but there is a big health issue with it. And like you say, somebody said it doesn't have much range. If you're going to put 5G in here in Moscow, I don't know how many of these towers or whatever you'd have to do it. And I read between 100 and 300 feet is the range. and that's not very much range under the 5G, so. But I've also read where it's 1,500 meters to 6 miles too, so if it's not obstructed by anything, so. But, no, I'm very relieved it's not, I was concerned about the health issues, the skin problems and melanoma that comes along with the 5G. So I'm a happy camper. Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Maury Weiss. I'm at 711 Park Drive, just across the intersection from this proposed site. And that's at 7th and Park is my address. Thank you, Steve Bush, for bringing up clearing the thing about monthly versus weekly checks of those diesel engines. If there are 3 carriers, there's potential for 3 diesel engines running and making noise. The permit does say they'll be checked weekly. As far as need goes, I've been in the neighborhood for 40 years. I currently have cell service and internet service, perfectly adequate and fine, from Verizon. So I'm guessing this would be an alternative, but it wouldn't do me one bit of difference, whether it's there for the service. Another thing to keep in mind is why this tower isn't adjacent to the church. If it's part of the church complex, I'm guessing that it might be not as desirable next to the church somewhere to reflect that complex. It's set aside near the intersection of 7th and Park, and conspicuously absent from the presentation of the proposer were shots from the south, immediate south, north, and east, but not west. And my house, that's southwest. So that tree proposal earlier was a pretty imposing structure, and this tower is just as much so. Just a couple of points then. Key parts in your city code is maintain the character of the neighborhood. I like the character of Eastgate subdivision right now because of the focus on the park. That triangular park is the center of interest for people who buy in there, and I enjoy that. This looks like a distraction from that focus we have. And then secondly, have minimal impact, visual impact on the surroundings. The tree didn't cut it, and I don't think this tower will either. So you have my brief notes in your packet. I appreciate this, and I'm asking you again, please, to deny this proposal.
Thank you.
My name is Gary Saunders. I live at 1217 Kamayakan Street, just south of the proposed lot. And first I wanted to say thank you. Just a few months ago, our community got together and we actually petitioned the city, and it all started with a 10-year-old girl who wrote a letter and said, I'd like to change the name of the park from Eastgate Park to Triangle Park, because everyone hears Eastgate Park and they think of East City Park. And it's confusing. We all call it Triangle Park, so let's rename it. So we just got a new sign up at Triangle Park earlier this year. We're really excited about that. I just had a few questions. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and to listen and also to speak. I appreciate the thoughtfulness, as this is a permanent possible change to our neighborhood. Once the tower goes up, I imagine it's easier to make it taller, but I imagine to bring it down is a significant effort. Just a few thoughts that I've had. In addition to what's already been said, as far as I don't see much difference between this proposal and the one that was denied previously. I think the objection last time was related to the significant height difference of the tower. If we look at the surrounding zone structures and look at what the maximum height is for those structures, I think you'll find that this tower is more than 3 times taller than the allowed value. And I think it might even be closer to 4 times taller. Like Maury said, I noticed in the packet that they did have a picture from the south. All of the other pictures seem to be taken from the property lines. I noticed the picture from the south, for one, was the only one taken portrait, so that it had much more sky in the picture. I also noticed that it wasn't taken from the property line, nor from across the street, nor from 1 or 2 properties down, from about 3 properties away from the church. If you look at that picture, you'll also see that the church building, which does have a cross on top, is almost completely invisible based on where the tower is. So it's not like we've got one tall structure and we're putting another tall structure right next to it. They're very separated, and as you're driving up the road, you really can't see the church, but the tower is going to be right there. Some other concerns just from this evening is it seems like the evaluation of the alternative sites was maybe incomplete, or at least not thorough. I do worry about upgrades. Once the tower is up, it sounds like they originally wanted a 100-foot tower, and I wonder what it would take to for them to come back and say, hey, the 80-foot's good, but now we've got 8G and we need it to be 100 feet. And then finally, what I don't see here tonight are people clamoring for better service. If we had neighbors from all around this area saying, hey, we need cell service, we need options, I think it would be different, but we don't see that clamoring for service here tonight. So the claim that this is necessary is something that I would disagree with. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Scott Fleischman. I live at 910 Camas Street. The people before me said a lot of what my fears were. Once it's up, it's harder to take down. It'll be easier to expand it. It is an eyesore. One thing I wanted to add to the last sentence was I'm against this, but I also really need it. We switched to T-Mobile from Sprint, and our house is a dead zone. If we didn't have Wi-Fi calling, we wouldn't be able to talk to anybody. Also, the whole Mountain View side of the city, I have no signal there. I could use it, but it's an eyesore. So just echoing everybody else, I think, excuse me, that those are my arguments, and maybe point out an irony. Has anybody else seen this as a Tower of Babel in the church parking lot? Just kind of seems a little weird. It's out of place, and yeah.
Thank you. Looks like everybody out in the audience has said their piece, so I will give the applicant one more chance to maybe rebut any of the comments stated and see if there's any concerns you can address.
Thank you very much, Kim Allen, for the applicant. Let me see here. Well, it was heartening to know that that Mr. Lewis is okay with us putting up a 4G tower, and I think we have heard mixed messages tonight on people's need for the service here. I think that the tower was placed where it is on the lot because it's in proximity to the access and to where power and telephone utilities can be accessed. So I think that's most likely why the tower is where it is, although it is in proximity to the church. Let's see. while the tower is taller than than the church, and certainly than some of the underlying zoning allows. Typically, communication towers are allowed to be taller because of the need to be able to clear that threshold of the underlying zoning to get a clear site for signal. And also, I'd like to emphasize that this particular tower is not all that much taller than the top of the church structure itself. It's certainly not wildly out of proportion to the height of the top of the cross on the church, and it is the minimum necessary to achieve the coverage objective here. So we have designed and engineered the most compatible solution for this particular property. It is a church use. It is a tower that's been designed to be part of the church architecture that one would find on a church campus throughout the country. I think that was most of the concerns. Also, though, over the break, we did take a look at the search ring and found that the properties that you indicated, the fairgrounds and the fire station, are at the very, very, very southern edge of the search ring, below the search ring. So I expect that's why they were not selected as alternatives here. And I think one last thing, if I could, I think that Greg, in reviewing the record of the proceedings from 2018, did not recall a comment or a suggestion to review the fairground property at that time. Is that right, Greg?
I am looking at the write-up of the reasoned statement of relevant criteria and standards, and that's what I had to go on from the record, and I do not see a suggestion in the decision to use the Latah County as an alternative. I do not see that in this document.
So it appears from the search ring that's included in your packet that these facilities were too far south to be able to serve the coverage objective.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I'll close the public hearing and open this up for the board to discuss. I have a question for staff. Oftentimes in our reports, there's a diameter circle, and this one doesn't have one, but I believe it was David that brought up a comment earlier about the separation just of the third zoning criteria, and well, actually was not the third one, excuse me, the seventh one. Let me correct myself again. The sixth one that talks about property distance, and it says that it would need to be separated from any adjacent property line that's residential by 80 feet, given the height of the tower, the full height of the tower, and it would need to be separated by any other adjacent property that's non-residential by 40 feet. So I'm assuming that height can be less to something that's non-residential. There's one house that Marshall clarified that the church itself owns, but that's who owns it has nothing to do with whether it's zoned residential or non-residential. So could you go back to that image and give us kind of an idea of where that tower sits where 40 feet is and then where 80 feet is?
Okay, so getting to that image here, oops, right here. Okay, so the cell tower is proposed right where the green dot is. I know that you probably can't see that on Zoom, but the applicant's well aware of where it is. The distance from the closest corner of the site location to this adjacent property here is just over 100 feet. So you can take, you know, I wish my hand wasn't shaking. You could probably see a little bit closer. There you go. All right. Okay. So again, I'm still not that steady. It roughly halfway through this southern property line, roughly about halfway through that is where the edge of that proposed site would be. From that location to this closest corner of this property here on Park and 7th, to that location, it's just over 100 feet. So I would estimate that the 40 foot distance would roughly sit somewhere, you know, maybe just right off of into the right of way. And then obviously in, you know, around in the diameter.
I guess my specific question is, the light green is residential. So according to that setback criteria,
The light
or
green
actually not the
here-
setback criteria, but if that tower was actually set in the middle of that red square, can you draw an 80-foot diameter to any property line that's light green? I guess that's my
You mean the
question.
yellow, because the
Or-
yellow would be the residential.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yellow, light green, but
It would be hard for me to make that estimation without measuring at this particular time.
If you look at Park Drive, that's a 60-foot right of way.
There you go.
That'll
Yeah.
give you an approximate distance that 60 feet
is the width of
20
Park
feet.
Drive.
Correct.
The width of Park Drive is 60 feet.
So
Between line to line there, property line to property line.
So from here, again, my not so steady hands are now changing slides.
So
From approximately here to the other side of Park is 60 feet.
So just from a rough graphic standpoint, if we draw a line straight across the bottom of NB, if we were to underline NB, if
Mhm.
that tower was sitting right about there, it would be approximately 80 feet from the house that they own, that property line to the south.
Well, this is actually Short's funeral home. This is the Nazarene campus over here.
Right?
So you're saying if they were to place it
But
here?
the tower is going inside the red box.
Correct. In this
So
corner.
So it needs to be 80 feet from right there where you're at,
Correct.
80 feet from that property line. So 80 feet going up from the bottom red line of the red
This
box.
direction?
Yep.
Yeah.
Puts it right about, you know, if we underlined NB all the way across there, that's about where 80 feet would be. But it's,
Roughly.
yes,
So
but I guess
referring-
my point is, based on that criteria, it can't be closer than 80 feet to the bottom of the red box.
They're referring to adjacent property. So this is all one property in our view. So if you look at the Nazarene campus, obviously property lines can't crisscross through buildings.
Gotcha.
So
That
that-
actually
ours-
answers my question. I didn't know that was not a separate property.
This is all, viewed as one campus. That's the way we would define lot within the zoning code. No matter how many parcels that are put together, as long as they're under common ownership.
That,
at the time
that
of
answers my
development.
question. So basically, 6th, Park, 7th, and Mountain View, that's one property.
Essentially one property. Yeah, we're viewing the distance from the tower to any adjacent property. So it'd be across Park or across 7th.
Okay.
Which is about 100 feet, as Amy had indicated before.
Okay.
Apologies, I didn't understand the question.
Well, I didn't explain it well. Marshall.
Amy or Mike, in neighborhood business, so what's the maximum height of building?
Neighborhood business, I believe, is 40 feet within that zone, but I can give you a quick answer. 40 feet, we do have an option of, so we inserted an option of a conditional use permit. They could go higher for institutional type buildings. So they would be able to apply for, so say a institutional use were to propose a building there, they could go through a conditional use permit process and be able to achieve higher than the 40 feet. But yeah, neighborhood business is 40 feet.
40 foot, and they could get a conditional use permit or a maximum. That you know.
There isn't a defined maximum, I don't believe, but let me double check on that.
Don't setbacks allow you to gain some height as well, the further back you go?
At one point in time, they did, but we had eliminated that from the code when we converted that to the use table. So yeah, exceedance of maximum building height for permitted non-residential uses. Neighborhood business, it's a conditional use permit. So not only telecommunications towers, but other structures that are non-residential, you can go through a conditional use permit to achieve higher than that. Obviously, if the Nazarene Church were to be built today, they would have to go through that process because, you know, as they indicated, it's in the 60s as far as the building height for the dome.
Maybe this is where Marshall was going with that, that we've heard a couple of people's concern that once the tower's built, it could keep being raised and raised. I assume that it would require another conditional use permit if they want to be more than 10 feet high.
Correct.
So I'd have to come back to it. I mean, it's just not, once it's built, they can just keep going up.
Yeah.
Obviously, it requires city and the board's approval.
Yeah, any modification of a tower of that height, even if they were to reduce the height, would have to go through a conditional use permit process. Correct.
I actually kind of disagree with that thought, and that thought that's why it's not adjacent to the church and why it actually couldn't be built on top of or in addition to the fire department thing. And everyone here knows I'm not a structural engineer, but I know enough that the foundation is a significant structural item that this tower has to have. And so it has to go deeper to deal with overturn and wind. And so that structural foundation is going to be built based on what it's made of and how high it goes. So you can't just keep going higher and higher without going deeper and deeper with the foundation. The tower at the fire station, that foundation is probably set for 3, maybe 4 stories. You couldn't keep building on it. Going right up adjacent to the church, you could potentially do that, but then you have to tie into their existing foundation as you go deeper and deeper. And so it becomes kind of structurally and construction wise without undercutting that footing to go deep and under it. So I think from a structural calculation standpoint, when they submit the plans, they'd have to show the structural calcs, and those would only support a certain amount of height. So from that standpoint, knowing just enough to be dangerous with structural engineering, I don't think that they could build this tower and then add to it later unless the structural footings could support taller to begin with.
Yeah, Joe's absolutely right. I inspected most towers in Lake County, and the footings on those towers are immense. And they can't just be stuck on a fire department training tower. They just would not support it.
So that, I suppose, of all the concerns tonight, I think that one I could fairly say is we could kind of dispel that one, because once they set it at the right height, you'd have to completely rebuild it from the ground up to do. The other comment from the flip side of that is, though, once you build it, it's not coming down. Someone would have to pay to take it down. So that's the permanence of it. And that was another concern. And it has to have, at 80 feet, it has to have 3 users. And so my concern is what happens when one of those goes out of business or changes names or is bought up by someone else, and now you've only got 2, but you're required to have 3, you can't not use it.
Are you
aren't
required to
going
have 3, or you're required to be available for 3?
I don't know, and that's, that's kind of a verbiage thing, and I don't know what the answer to that is.
I think the answer is you're required to be able to offer services to 3, but not necessarily have 3.
There was provision for it, but I don't think there was any other.
I can't remember who was on board last time, but I remember that was part of the deal was you just can't have, I think the theory is you don't want to have just towers popping up all over. And so to try to consolidate, you want to do the best you can.
For part of the space be available for that
Right.
opportunity. And Mark's exactly right that we don't want a proliferation of towers throughout town. So if we require co-location of up to 3 carriers per tower, then that, dispels that to a certain extent.
And the separation of carriers kind of pushes the height up. So I guess the other thing to facilitate our discussion, the applicant mentioned 4 criteria, but I just want to remind us, we actually have 7 conditional use criteria that we address. And one of those actually is required to address the 8 of the zoning things that Amy covered. So as we talk about this, whether we approve it or deny it, we're doing that based on our 7 relevant criteria for conditional uses.
If I can also interject, so it's the typical 7 for relevant criteria, but also a conditional permit of this type also has an additional 4 criteria that are also listed in your staff report.
Oh, okay. So the 4 that Kim addressed, and then if I read 6 of our 7, that it has to meet design development standards. At that point, I'm assuming it also has to meet the 8 that you covered under the zoning requirements.
Correct.
Okay. So who'd care to take a stab at the 7 that we've got first? Fair enough.
One of the reasons I asked Mike what the national height for building in neighborhood business was, because even though it is a tower, it looks more like a building, and it meets the definition of a building. So I guess if you considered it a building and a tower, it would be under the same conditional use permit as tonight. Correct, yep. So that was one consideration. A couple of things that disturbed me a little bit. One, I feel there are better sites for the structure of this size and this height out of the residential zone. Even though it's neighborhood business, it's essentially surrounded by residential. I feel there are better sites that were not explored, and that certainly looked at. Another thing that disturbs me is, even though it's in neighborhood business, it's still in a residential area as far as noise, maintenance, generation, things like that. That I think that my own personal opinion that cell towers are better suited in commercial or industrial type zones and not,
So I go ahead.
I agree with Marshall, but I also disagree with your favorite location, because that same group of residents would complain that now not only are they dealing with hockey puck noise, but now they'd be looking at a tower with no trees, because the fairgrounds really doesn't have any. So now all those adjacent properties from a sight line, you can actually see further and higher because a tree is not blocking you. So I agree with your premise, but I disagree with your site. But that's just an opinion.
No,
Mark?
what I was gonna say, and we've heard testimony about those in the immediate neighborhood don't necessarily need, well, I guess with the exception of one individual, and I have the same issue with Sprint / T-Mobile that you do. Since the merge, I gotta tell you, the service is awful, but we're not dealing with Sprint T-Mobile in this direction. But as I'm looking here and I'm trying to take an objective view on what's happening, I'm looking at the maps that were provided, and it seems to me that the target here isn't necessarily that neighborhood, but it's the neighborhood north, where there's a huge gap in coverage. I understood the applicant to say they looked at these other places. I know that there's the water tower. I know that there's been a lot of problems with the water tower. I think last time, I want to say, if I'm remembering correctly, part of the problem, they couldn't put something on top because, remember, it had that flexible top, so that wouldn't support it. They tried to do something around it. I'm reading here that they tried to get a different building up there. The city didn't approve it. I don't have any history on what the city's doing with it. But as I'm looking here at what they're proposing, you know, they're a product of RF, and it's a product of RF and propagation. I understand why they're doing what they're doing. I understand their comment that if they were down below at the fairgrounds, I think that puts them below, really towards the bottom of what their target area is. So I accept that what they're trying to do is put this in an area that's going to have the most benefit to everybody. And I also, in looking at their map, accept that the immediate neighborhood is fine with regard to AT&T. I don't have any trouble believing that everybody there has great cell coverage, although I will represent, and I know that one of the individuals here on T-Mobile, I can drive down 6th Street right past the project site between 6th and Blaine and have absolutely no service there for whatever reason. Don't know why, but that's T-Mobile, and that's unfortunately who I've got at present. But it doesn't appear that that's a problem with AT&T. So, and then going back to last time we were here, we were talking about a tree that was just completely out of place, and I seem to recall that was that was really the driving problem that we had, and it was the idea of whether that was in harmony with the neighborhood. I think that's criteria number 2, and I think the giant tree out there was pretty clearly not. This one does a better job. I'm still struggling with it a little bit, but I think it's closer to the mark of what we're dealing with. The other thing I'm aware of is I think if we wanted to put the same thing just a short distance to the south by the fairgrounds, I think we're gonna have the same conversation. I mean, whether or not it's on the fairgrounds, whether or not it's right here, I imagine it wouldn't surprise me if many of the same people who are here tonight objecting would be objecting again for exactly the same reasons. And I think, as I understand the applicant, the problem that they have is from an RF and propagation and coverage perspective, that doesn't work as well down there. So they kind of are where they are. I think, again, I'm trying to look at this objectively. I think they're, again, I can't speak to what's going on with the city, but it sounds like that's not been productive, and they're back with a proposal that, from their perspective, makes more sense. They're trying to put something in that looks consistent with what we're doing. I would think that a church tower is more consistent than a really tall pine tree. Honestly, you know, last time it was way off the mark, I thought, and this time it's closer. So anyway, those are just some of my thoughts that are kicking around my head right now.
I tend to agree, Mark. I know that we've heard a couple people say the same thing as far as they feel like it's the same project as last time. We did deny it last time, well, deny this one. I do see it differently than a ugly fake pine tree. It does seem to me to be more conforming to the of that particular property. And considering a lot of the comments that Marshall made, which are always valid, it seems to me that the city, when it prepares its zoning and allows for such a structure in this zone with the following development standard, it's thought through how requirements and standards that, if met,
should be acceptable. And as I go through all 8 of them, they're all addressed. And so I have a little bit of a hard time saying it's not consistent when in fact they're able to meet the noise reductions, the signage, the antenna towers, the aesthetic considerations in a manner that seems convincing to me. So that's kind of the criteria I kind of use to appease my thoughts on this particular project.
Mike?
I just wanted to add one point of clarity. As far as the fairgrounds, that's all zoned residential. So it's an R3 zone. This is actually a commercial zone. It's neighborhood business. So I didn't know if that played into your discussion or not, but I thought I'd point that out.
Thank you.
And I think my purpose of bringing that up was, I don't think the discussion would be any different from a practical point of view and from neighbors not wanting it. I think we would be dealing with the same things before.
Even though it's zoned R3, the actual use is not residential. 2, you might have some neighbors complain, but if you put it in the middle of the fairgrounds, it's a lot further away from the residents.
Steve, thoughts?
Well, it seems to me that it's like Dave was saying, it's the same project with no real significant changes other than the type of structure that's going there. It's not any difference in height. It might be wider and larger actually than around than the tree. And my thought has been, putting myself in the neighbor's shoes, what would I think? How would I feel? And I'm not so much opposed to the building itself as I am opposed to the maintenance of part of it, of running the generators on a weekly basis. And to me, that seems like excessive to ask people to put up with that on a weekly basis. Don't know when they're going to do it. They didn't say. There's no indication. I do think that there probably are some alternative sites I haven't looked at that would be more user-friendly. And if they're going to get something further north, if they're looking for trying to get coverage further north, going to the fairgrounds isn't the answer. But you wouldn't have to worry about, the trees or anything else that are there to hide this tower, because it could be a freestanding facility without having to have it near any other structures. But again, I think that if they wanted to go further north, I think there's some other sites to the north that could be utilized and would be more conducive to the fact that they wouldn't have close neighbors. Just thinking through town a little bit of where those might be, and especially if they wanted to again go to the north and try and reach those northern customers in northern part of town. And my other concern is some of the neighbors are saying, is there really a need for it, because everybody that's in the area is already being serviced by either another carrier or there's not people here that are AT&T users saying we need this service. That's a little concerning to me, that there's nobody here saying I really could use this service, and I suppose they don't know that they could use this service. Maybe they're just not aware of that, what this is going to provide for them that would be something maybe really excited to have, I don't know. So a lot of different ideas, a lot of different thoughts, but I really can't pinpoint my pros or cons, and certainly a fence sitter on this one.
Is whether or not there's a need relevant to us? It's not one of the design criteria, it's not one of the criteria, it's not one of the relevant criteria standards. I mean, I have to assume that the company wouldn't install something that would grow a building if they didn't think it was going to serve a purpose for the community, and that's the whole purpose of this thing. And I don't know how we would go out and test all of the users. I guess since we're not all here that are going to benefit from it, they want to prove what we're even doing.
Probably true.
One of
Probably
these
true.
days, they're going to say, they're going to see 5 bars instead of 2. It's like, God, I don't know why, but why that happened.
I guess my thought is, in looking at these 7 criteria, we're really all talking about items 2 and 3. 2 having to do with whether it's harmonious and in character with where it's at, and 3 as to whether or not it's a nuisance. The decibel level, it would have been nice if someone had addressed, really a comparison as to what 45 decibels really is. That can be mitigated, but not with a chain link fence. So I was almost going to dismiss 3 because it can be addressed, but this doesn't really address it. So we're really back to 2. The other 5, the answer is yes, it complies, and even the first one, as long as it meets all these other conditions, it's a permitted use. So really, we're down to number 2, and that is it harmonious with where it's sitting? And that's asking all of us what's good art, and every single one of us is going to have a different answer.
So Joe, I think on number 3 on the, if we were looking at that, I think we can deal with, it sounds to me like the nuisance would be the noise of the generator when they're doing that. And I think,
and I think just
that's relatively
a simple screen wall with a fence. I say it's got vegetation around it, but it could be a condition, Mike.
And they're proposing a masonry wall, so that's required as part of the design guidelines, instead of solid.
Okay, then I missed
brick
that in the
masonry
thing.
wall.
I read a chain link fence somewhere, and so I
I
misunderstood.
believe that was initially what they had proposed, but we worked with the applicant to correct that.
Okay.
And now they're proposing a masonry wall.
So again, I kind of thought 3 could be dismissed because it could be dealt with, which we could have done with a condition, but we don't need to now. So really, we're back to item 2. Is it in harmony with where it's at?
Harmony with the neighborhood and harmony with the church that it's with. There's an effort to make it look churchy.
it's far closer than what we were dealing with
Yeah.
in the past.
I need someone to make a motion. I guess before someone does that, the applicant mentioned they'd done, and this is going to be directed to the city, that they'd pursued multiple options on city type properties. Is there a reason why those didn't work out, other than obviously for the same structural reasons? You can't mount something tall and heavy on top of a water tower. I don't know if adjacency is an issue, or other city properties, if those were even addressed by the applicant with the city.
I know the Vista tank, there are issues with that. I think Mark had alluded to just the kind of the soft membrane bladder to that. And then really not being able to put any, a lot of the ones that are mounted to water tanks they have the railing where you walk around the outside. And that's another aspect of the Vista. It doesn't have that hard railing that you can just mount the antennas to, or else they probably would have, seen multiple carriers up on that tower. So I know that those are the issues with the tower itself. I don't believe the city was willing to enter into a lease for a standalone tower, is why that one didn't, get pursued.
That makes sense.
Okay, I'll take a stab at this. I move that we approve a conditional use permit application for the proposed 80-foot tall wireless communication facility and direct the staff to prepare a reasoned statement and relevant criteria and standards.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second Tim's motion.
I have a motion. I have a second. Since we have an odd number, someone has to be the bad guy. I will take on that role, unfortunately. So I have a motion. I have a second. Mark.
Aye.
Marshall.
Nay.
Nay. So the motion does not pass.
I think you're right about the criteria, so I think the noise can mitigate one way or another.
And Mike clarified that they had addressed that. This is really coming down to the harmony of where it's being cited.
I think the criteria number 2 is being in harmony with the plan. I'm not sure I know wherever it will get done. Unless it's outside of the city, core. Well, even the commercial zone is supposed to be. State was just across the street from.
I hesitate to speculate sites. I can think of a few, but based on how Kim answered my question earlier about sometimes a 95-foot tower doesn't do it, sometimes a 30-foot tower doesn't do it, sometimes an 80-foot one does. I don't understand the signal weight and how that has an impact on its height. But that just, I don't see how it fits the harmony aspect of the criteria that we're given, even though it meets the other 8 zoning standards.
Well, that motion failed, and the motion to deny it.
We haven't denied anything for so long. I think that actually is the appropriate thing to do, is it not?
Well, that motion failed, so you would need another motion and a second.
So we have to go until we have a motion that passes. So Marshall, you're correct. So would you care to make a motion?
Make a motion to deny the conditional use permit and direct staff to prepare the relevant criteria and standards. And my only hesitation is that I don't think it's fine. Would feel good about trying to force through that criteria.
And I agree with the staff providing the relevant criteria and findings of fact, because in the event of an appeal, that information's what they're going to want to rely on. So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Yeah, do you have any more clarification on what specifically is not in harmony?
Yeah,
to be able
I
to-
made the motion by specifically, I feel that it's more than a tower, it's more of a building. I think it sticks out and does not fit the need larger than any other, taller than any other structure there. And it just does not look like, to me, it does not look like part of the church. To me, like a garden. So the size of the tower.
The height, basically, is what's. Does that help? So I have a motion. I have a second.
I'll second it.
I have a motion. I have a second. Do the same thing. Mark?
Nay.
Marshall? Tim?
Yes.
Yes. So it passes 3-2. So we have a motion that passed. Okay, that gets us to what was our second item, and that is election of officers for the year. We're missing 2 people. Does that matter?
They're not here to defend themselves.
We have a new chair and a new vice chair, and those ladies can be informed next time they're here. I need to point out the reason I'm late is I'm working on a job, and so I am actually working out of the Spokane office through basically summer of 2022. It's on it's a high school project in Royal City. So I can get here by 7, but I can't make the 5:30 meetings. Even if I'm not on site in Royal, I'll be in Spokane, and we don't typically Zoom that one. So I wanted everyone to know that that's why I was late. So I left you a message, Amy, but don't judge me when you hear the time of the message and where I told you I was and what time I actually showed up here, because I was going pretty fast. So I just want
We know you pulled over.
I pulled over and used the speaker app on my phone. I didn't text it. I was not texting and driving, but I was on my radio.
I move that we nominate or I move that we have Joe continue as chair and he's doing an excellent job. I also move that Mark continue as vice chair. He's doing a great job. Second.
Wow, that was quick, Tim.
He didn't even give us a chance to deny. Well, I have a motion. I have a second. I don't know about Mark. I don't mind doing it. I just want everyone to know I can't make the 5:30 meetings, at least through July of 2022. I appreciate that.
Either that or it's really getting late.
Yeah, yeah, that too.
Who else?
Well, I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? None. Motion passes.
All right.
Do we have anything forthcoming?
We do have 2 additional conditional use permits coming. I believe Jennifer sent out an email about availability for the week of the 20th of April. I don't know if she's gotten confirmation back on a date that works well. Additionally, while we're here, we might want to set a night for the RCS, just while we're here. Quick meeting. It will have to be before the week of the 20th because of the 21-day requirement. So
How long does staff need to do it? Because I would highly suspect that the applicant will appeal. So I want to give you enough time to actually draft something that the city council is most likely going to see.
I don't think it would take long to draft.
Just next week sometime would work.
At least 5 days, right?
Whatever works for you, bro.
Well, I can't make it at 5:30. I mean, if we were to have a 7 o'clock meeting, that. Oh, are we going to start doing those at 7 o'clock instead of 5:30?
Unless we know we got a quorum.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't want to make everybody come later in the evening because those only take 10, 15 minutes max to do and approve minutes.
Can we? I don't.
Speeding down the highway?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Yeah.
As long as we have,
Yeah, we can set Zoom up for you.
Yeah.
Just on the laptop.
Okay.
Set up the whole. So yeah, if you just wanted to call in your phone real quick, we could do that. That would work.
I can do because I can just sit right there at the office and just Zoom right in if wasn't going to be a quorum. If 3 of you, I mean, it only takes 3.
Yeah.
But if for some reason we were down to 2, I could definitely Zoom in.
We can do Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday next week. Oh, we cannot do Thursday. We can do Tuesday or Wednesday.
I can be available Tuesday or I can be available either of those 2 days to Zoom in if there's not 3 of you that can make those.
Either's fine by me. Tuesday or Wednesday's fine by me.
Wednesday was better.
Does it? Wednesday at
Give it a little bit more
5:30?
time. Let's do next Wednesday, and I'll
5:30.
only plan to zoom in
what day is
if,
that?
if there's not enough.
What?
April 7th.
7, okay.
And then I did send out an email about the next 2 or 3 feet or 2 feet applications. About what are the 20th, 21st, and 22nd.
I ran in here so fast, I didn't bring my phone.
I
So,
responded to
I'm-
it, I'm still uncertain which date, and I've got it down for part, one of those dates. I haven't found out which.
Okay, then that's fine, yeah.
And I was traveling, I was on site today, that's why I didn't see the message, but I'm sure I'll see it tomorrow, so I can
Is
check
that
my.
today? That was,
I sent it a couple weeks.
I say, I thought that was a couple days
Oh.
ago.
Not
Yeah.
20th.
20th is not.
Well, I
good for
couldn't
me.
make this thing personal tonight, but I'm not getting AOL reception anymore. So can you send that to my work email? Because that one I get. I would benefit from cell tower, but that's not what this was about.
Is your work email a better email address to get you?
Yes, actually, it would be.
I try to send it to both of them. I may have forgotten.
I appreciate that. Yeah, because I thought it was one that was just sent today and I just didn't see it.
These are what?
I believe, Jennifer, did you leave that home? Yeah, that's the zoning code.
Oh. on this
Nice.
little thing here?
Yeah.
Okay. I won't take long.
You'll have it all figured out by next time.
I'll just.
There you go, just plug it in. Okay, so we should have a date, maybe then by tomorrow, if the 2 of you respond for the upcoming hearings.
Yes.
Okay.
And those dates are,
In
are,
order for
are
those dates to work.
late
we need
April,
to
right?
Submit to the paper for publishing by Wednesday, so.
Okay.
2021 and 22.
Yep,
Yeah.
2021 and 22.
I think I responded,
20th
but
is
I'm
not good
I'm
for me.
basically available any of those nights if I haven't.
Okay.
Yeah, if we can avoid yeah,
Jennifer, what
Wednesday,
days of the week are those?
I think it's a
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Jennifer, even though I reply, keep me in that because it's a couple, unconfirmed things, that's why.
That's fine.
All right. Oh, yeah. You
Yeah.
can't just get up and leave. I need a motion to adjourn and someone to second it.
Yes, I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. That's unanimous. Thank you.